Life has a way of catching us off guard, throwing us into situations we could never anticipate. My story began 3 years ago when I married Mark, a kind and devoted man who had been through his share of struggles. Mark lost his first wife in a tragic car accident several years earlier, leaving him to raise his son, Ethan, on his own. When we married, I knew I was stepping into not just a new chapter of my life, but also a family already shaped by loss and resilience. Ethan was 14 when I became his stepmother. He was a quiet, introspective teenager, carrying the weight of his mother's absence in his own way. At first, our interactions were polite but distant. I understood his reluctance to fully embrace me, a stranger who had suddenly become part of his home. I didn't push him to open up. I wanted to give him space to process the changes in his own time. Mark worked long hours, often leaving Ethan and me alone at home. I tried to create a warm and welcoming environment, cooking meals, tidying up, and occasionally asking Ethan how his day at school had been. His responses were usually brief, a simple "it was fine" or "nothing much happened." I accepted this as his way of keeping his guard up. After all, he had every reason to be cautious. Over time, however, things began to change. Small gestures built a bridge between us, a shared laugh over a silly TV show, a compliment on a meal I'd cooked, or a moment when he opened up about a project he was working on for school. Slowly but surely, Ethan began to trust me. He started sharing more about his life, his love for music, his struggles with certain classes, and the things he missed most about his mom. I listened, encouraging him without prying too much. I was determined to earn his trust and create a safe space for him to express himself. But just when I thought we had found a balance, subtle shifts in our dynamic began to unsettle me. Ethan's gestures of kindness, helping me carry groceries, offering to assist with chores, felt more frequent and deliberate. His compliments grew more personal. His gaze lingered longer than it should have, and his presence in my daily routines became increasingly noticeable. While I initially brushed off these observations as my imagination, a growing unease settled in my mind. One evening, while Mark was away on a business trip, Ethan and I were watching a movie in the living room. Midway through, he turned to me with a look I couldn't quite decipher. "You're amazing, you know that," he said, his tone sincere but intense. My heart skipped a beat, unsure of how to interpret his words. "Thank you, Ethan," I replied cautiously, redirecting my attention back to the screen. Little did I know, that moment marked the beginning of a series of events that would challenge everything I thought I knew about family, trust, and boundaries. What unfolded over the next few months tested my strength in ways I never imagined. After that evening in the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between Ethan and me. His compliment, though simple on the surface, lingered in my mind, replaying itself as I tried to make sense of it. I told myself it was nothing, just a teenager expressing gratitude in his own way. But the days that followed brought more moments that made me question this assumption. Ethan began to spend more time around me, seeking out opportunities to be close. If I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, he would appear and offer to help, even if it was something as small as washing a single dish. When I worked in the garden, he would come outside, asking questions about the flowers or offering to carry heavy pots. While these gestures might have seemed harmless to an outsider, there was a noticeable shift in the way he interacted with me. His compliments became more personal. "You have a way of making everything better," he said one day while we were cleaning up after dinner. I smiled and brushed it off, but inwardly, I felt a growing discomfort. One evening, while Mark was working late, Ethan and I sat down to dinner together. He was unusually quiet at first, picking at his food as though he had something on his mind. Finally, he spoke. "Do you ever think about what it would have been like if things were different?" he asked, his tone contemplative. "What do you mean?" I replied, genuinely unsure of where he was going with this. "If Mom were still here," he said softly, "do you think things would be better or worse?" I paused, sensing the weight of his question. "I think it's impossible to compare," I said gently. "Your mom will always have a special place in your heart, and no one can ever replace that. But I hope you know that I care about you and want the best for you." Ethan nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on me, as if searching for something unsaid. "You've been really good to me," he murmured, "better than I deserve." "You deserve kindness, Ethan," I replied, trying to defuse the tension. "We all do." Over time, Ethan's behavior grew more intense. He would find excuses to touch my hand or shoulder during conversations, gestures that felt increasingly deliberate. Once, while I was folding laundry, he offered to help and brushed his hand against mine longer than necessary. "You're amazing, you know that," he said again, his voice low. I quickly pulled my hand away and forced a smile, unsure of how to respond. The situation escalated one evening when Mark was out of town for a weekend business trip. Ethan knocked on my bedroom door, something he had never done before. I hesitated before answering. "What is it, Ethan?" I asked through the door. "Can we talk?" he replied. His voice sounded hesitant, almost pleading. "I think we should save it for tomorrow," I said firmly, unwilling to open the door. "Please, just for a minute," he insisted. Reluctantly, I opened the door a crack to see him standing there, his expression a mix of sadness and determination. "I just wanted to say I think I feel something I shouldn't," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help it." My heart raced as his words sank in. "Ethan, stop," I said, my voice firm but calm. "This is not something we can talk about. I'm your stepmother, and I care about you like a parent. Whatever you're feeling, it's not appropriate, and it needs to stop." He looked down, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." I closed the door gently and leaned against it, my mind racing. How had things come to this? I felt trapped, unsure of how to navigate the situation without breaking apart our fragile family dynamic. The next morning, Ethan avoided me entirely, leaving the house early and returning late. I hoped the distance would give us both time to reset. When Mark returned, I wrestled with the decision to tell him. On one hand, I didn't want to burden him with something so complicated. On the other, I felt the weight of secrecy growing heavier with each passing day. Finally, one evening after dinner, I sat him down. "There's something I need to talk to you about," I began, my hands trembling. Mark's face grew serious as I recounted the events of the past few weeks. I explained Ethan's behavior carefully, trying to avoid casting blame while being honest about my discomfort. Mark listened intently, his expression shifting from confusion to anger to sadness. "I can't believe this," he said finally, "my own son." "He's struggling, Mark," I said gently. "This isn't about blaming anyone. He's a teenager trying to process complicated feelings, and he needs help." Mark nodded, his face weary. "You're right, we need to address this." The next day, Mark spoke to Ethan privately. I stayed in the kitchen, my heart pounding as I overheard fragments of their conversation. When Mark emerged, he looked drained. "He's going to stay with his aunt for a while," he said. "It'll give us all some space to figure things out." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. While I knew this was the right decision, it still hurt to see Ethan struggle. In the weeks that followed, the house felt quieter, almost too quiet. Ethan's absence left a void that was difficult to ignore. I missed the moments when we laughed together or shared simple conversations. Despite everything that had happened, I still cared deeply for him and wanted the best for his future. Mark and I worked on strengthening our relationship during this time. We spent more evenings talking, reflecting on how to create a healthy dynamic for our family. Mark often expressed his guilt, wondering if his long work hours had contributed to the situation. I reassured him that no single factor was to blame and that our focus should be on moving forward. Ethan, meanwhile, began attending counseling sessions while staying with his aunt. Mark kept in touch with him regularly, ensuring he felt supported while also reinforcing the importance of boundaries. Over time, Ethan's demeanor shifted. When he returned home a few months later, he seemed more composed and mature. Though there was still a lingering awkwardness between us, we both made an effort to rebuild trust and understanding. One evening, as we sat together for dinner, Ethan looked at me and said, "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't mean to hurt you or Dad." His words carried a sincerity that brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Ethan," I replied. "I know this has been hard for all of us, but I'm proud of the progress you've made." From that point on, our family began to heal. The journey wasn't without its challenges, but we faced them together, leaning on each other for strength. Ethan found new ways to channel his emotions, focusing on his passion for music and forming healthier relationships with his peers. Mark and I continued to nurture our marriage, ensuring that open communication remained a priority. Looking back, the experience taught me profound lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and the complexities of human emotions. Families are not perfect, and neither are the people within them. What matters most is how we confront challenges, learn from them, and strive to grow stronger together. Our story is a testament to the power of love and understanding. While the scars of the past remain, they serve as reminders of how far we've come. Together, as a family, we found a way to navigate the storms of life, emerging on the other side with renewed hope and unity. As the months turned into years, the challenges we faced became distant memories, though they had left their mark on each of us. Ethan grew into a thoughtful and empathetic young man, one who carried himself with a quiet strength. The counseling sessions had helped him navigate his emotions and develop a healthier perspective on relationships and boundaries. He eventually graduated high school and pursued his passion for music, composing pieces that often reflected his inner journey. Mark and I continued to foster open communication in our family, ensuring that no issue, big or small, was left unresolved. The experience had brought us closer, solidifying our bond and teaching us to approach each challenge as a team. We made it a point to create family traditions, movie nights, weekend hikes, and Sunday dinners, activities that helped us reconnect and build positive memories together. Ethan and I gradually reestablished a sense of normalcy in our relationship. While the initial discomfort had faded, a new layer of mutual respect and understanding had replaced it. He once said to me, "Thank you for not giving up on me when it would have been easier to walk away." His words reminded me why families endure through hardships, not because it's easy, but because love makes it worthwhile.